Most people thought it was impossible, even reckless. A wild bobcat could never be raised in a home. But there was a man in Montana who raised a bobcat like a family member in his home for 17 years. Tom Mitchell Hayes wasn't a wildlife expert or veterinarian, just a retired carpenter with calloused hands and a promise he couldn't break. For 17 years, through sleepless nights, shredded furniture, and moments that nearly broke him, he kept his promise to a bobcat kitten pulled from a fur farm cage. Despite warnings from wildlife experts that bobcats could never be tamed and that this was a disaster waiting to happen, Tom proved them all wrong, with a life worth saving and a companion worth the impossible. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The autumn wind cut sharp through the Flathead Valley as Tom Mitchell Hayes, retired carpenter, former mechanic, and lifelong Montanan, guided his old pickup along the two-lane road outside Kalispell. He had taken this route countless times in his 50 years, the air rich with the resinous scent of lodgepole pines and the tang of the Flathead River. On that October morning, the aspens burned gold against the evergreens, and yet he found himself slowing when a weathered sign flashed past. Mountain View Fur Farm. Premium pelts. Visitors welcome. Most people in town pretended the farm didn't exist. It was easier not to think about wire cages and animals reduced to inventory numbers. Tom had always said the same. He respected the wild and believed in leaving it be. But something made him turn down the gravel drive that day. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fate. Maybe, as he would later say, it was the first whisper of a promise he hadn't yet made. A stocky man in a flannel shirt met him by the barn. "We're not a petting zoo," the owner, Earl Hutchinson, grunted. "You break it, you buy it." "Not here to pet anything," Tom replied, though he wasn't entirely sure why he was there at all. Earl shrugged and gestured him through. The smell hit Tom first, musky and metallic and wrong. Rows of wire pens stretched toward the tree line, each one holding what nature never intended. Foxes pacing in endless circles, mink huddled in corners, and a bobcat mother moving with mechanical precision. 3 steps left, pivot, 3 steps right. Her golden eyes had the glassy look of an animal gone half mad from confinement. At her belly huddled 4 tiny kittens, their coats still fuzzy with newborn down. One of them, smaller than his siblings with a faint white blaze on his chest, struggled to compete for milk. His paw, no bigger than a thumbnail, pushed weakly against his mother's fur. In that instant, Tom felt something ignite in his chest. It wasn't pity exactly. He had seen enough of the world to know that pity was useless. It was something fiercer, the sense that a life was being measured out in dollars and ounces when it should have been measured in sunsets and scent trails. "That runt probably won't make it anyway," Earl said when he followed Tom's gaze. "Happens sometimes. Nature's way." But this wasn't nature. This was commerce. Tom heard his own voice before his mind caught up. What if someone wanted to take one home? Legally, I mean. Earl barked a laugh. "A bobcat? You'd need a controlled exotic wildlife permit, state strict, inspections, protocols, fences up to the sky, and even if you got one, they're wild animals. They don't make pets." Fairy tale thinking. That night, Tom tossed and turned. The image of the kitten's tiny paw reaching through the wire seared onto the backs of his eyelids. His cabin, filled with the smell of pine shavings and the creak of old floorboards, had never felt emptier. 3 years earlier, his wife, Martha, had died after a brief illness. He'd thrown himself into work and repair jobs to dull the ache, But loneliness seeped in like Montana cold. On impulse, he sat down at his computer and typed, "Montana Controlled Exotic Wildlife Permit." The state's website was plain and bureaucratic. It spelled out requirements in blunt language. A $25 application fee, a full environmental assessment, secure enclosures with 8-foot fences and overhangs, double gates and locks, emergency plans, and an on-site inspection. It listed the animals classified as controlled, bobcats among them, and stated in bold that possession was a privilege, not a right. Tom printed the packet. As dawn seeped through the kitchen curtains, he sorted requirements into piles: fencing catalogs, permit applications, veterinary contacts. His daughter, Sarah, stopped by later that morning and stared at the stacks. "You're not serious," she said. "Dad, you can't be serious. A bobcat? In town? You're a mechanic, not a zookeeper." "Not in town," Tom corrected. "On my property. 5 acres is plenty for a proper enclosure. There's a kitten out there that won't live to see spring unless someone does something." Sarah raked a hand through her hair, exasperated and concerned. "This is crazy. People will think you've lost it." Tom glanced at the dog-eared photograph of Martha on the fridge and shrugged. "Maybe I have. Maybe that's exactly why I need to do this." For 6 weeks, his quiet life was upended. He poured his savings into heavy-gauge mesh and sturdy posts, dug trenches for concrete footings, and built a fortress in his back pasture. He drafted safety protocols, learning about bobcat diet, zoonotic diseases, enrichment activities, and emergency procedures. He spoke with wildlife rehabilitators, veterinarians, and state biologists, absorbing their advice with the doggedness of a man who had spent his life making things square and level. Neighbors peered over fences and shook their heads. Margaret Whitfield, who had shared Thanksgiving pies with the Hayes family for decades, finally confronted him one evening. "Tom Morrison Mitchell Hayes, have you gone mad?" she demanded. "Whatever you're doing back there, folks are talking." Tom wiped sweat from his brow and leaned on his shovel. "Maybe, but I reckon if something keeps you up at night, if it makes you build fences and read manuals until your eyes hurt, maybe it deserves the effort." When the inspector from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks arrived, Tom's heart pounded like he was 20 again. James Rodriguez, a lean man with kind eyes and a clipboard, walked the perimeter, tugged on wire, checked welds, and tested locks. He paged through Tom's emergency response plan, noting evacuation routes and veterinary contacts. "Why a bobcat, Mr. Hayes?" he finally asked. "Most people apply for something easier. Parrots, tortoises, hedgehogs." Tom didn't tell him about Martha or the hollow feeling that had settled into his chest since she died. He told him about the fur farm and the white-blazed kittens scraping at the wire. "If I don't try, that life ends in a coat sleeve. I can't unsee that." James stared at him for a long moment, then nodded and signed. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Permit approved. Earl nearly dropped his cigarette when Tom returned to the farm with the permit in hand. "You were serious," he muttered, though he still looked vaguely amused as he accepted payment for the runt, a price he considered profitless for defective merchandise. Tom took the kitten home in a cardboard carrier lined with flannel. The little creature, no larger than a soda can, eyes a cloudy blue, trembled in his palms. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise." He named him Cougar, spelling "be damned." The name felt both aspirational and honest, a reminder that the kitten would grow into something powerful and wild. Those first nights were a blur of bottle feedings and frantic worry. Tom warmed milk replacer to precisely 101 degrees Fahrenheit, listening to the microwave beep like a call bell in the small hours. Cougar quickly learned the sound, his mewing growing louder and insistent the moment it chimed. Tom, who had built houses and engines, now found himself coaxing a few milliliters of formula into a mouth no bigger than his thumb. During the day, he tucked the kitten into his shirt pocket while he worked, letting the steady beat of his heart and the rise and fall of his chest mimic the rhythms of a feline mother. At night, he lined a large dog crate beside his bed with his old flannel shirt so the scent would comfort the orphaned bobcat. The cries that first pierced the darkness gradually softened as Cougar came to trust that warmth and food would always follow. As the weeks passed, Cougar opened his eyes fully, their murky blue shifting to brilliant gold. Tiny claws emerged from velvet paws. His stubbed tail twitched like a question mark when he pounced on Tom's shoelaces. At 3 months, he discovered he could climb. Everything. Curtains were shredded, furniture toppled. Tom's threadbare recliner became Cougar's chosen throne, its upholstery ravaged and yet now immovable. When Sarah visited and found her father bandaging fresh scratches, she groaned. "You're going to end up in the hospital," she warned. "You can't discipline a bobcat like a house cat." "We're both learning," Tom replied. "He's not an accessory. He's a wild animal learning to live with me, and I'm learning to live with him. We're meeting in the middle." To give Cougar space and stimulation, Tom rigged 4 50-foot lead lines across his property. The young bobcat would spend hours stalking grasshoppers, pouncing on shadows and crunching leaves underfoot. Tom marveled at the innate grace and ferocity that no captivity could erase. He introduced solid food carefully: rabbits from a local butcher, whole quail for bone crunching, venison delivered in hidden medication later in life. The mudroom became Cougar's designated dining room, the only place in the house where raw meat was allowed. Eventually, Tom ventured beyond his property. The first trip to Woodland Park was nearly disastrous. A group of teenagers spotted them and rushed over with cell phones. Cougar spooked, muscles bunching, his wild instincts screaming to flee. Tom held on with both hands and ducked behind a stand of pines until his companion's breathing slowed. After that, he went at dawn, when dew glittered on the grass and only robins kept them company. Gradually, they walked later, letting Cougar acclimate to the curious glances and whispered questions. In town, the reaction was mixed. Some folks crossed the street when they saw the bobcat on a lead, eyes wide and mouths set in thin lines. Others, especially children, were enchanted. The employees at the credit union became unlikely friends. Tom's Friday afternoon deposits turned into ritual. Betty Henderson, the head teller, kept a small dish of goat milk behind the counter. "How's our boy today?" she'd ask as Cougar peered through the open truck window with massive paws on the dashboard. "Ornery as ever," Tom would reply, though his tone belied affection. Cougar never ceased to remind Tom that he was no domesticated cat. He could leap 12 feet from a standstill. He learned to open doorknobs, turn on faucets, and, infuriatingly, steal Tom's reading glasses. He developed preferences: rainbow trout over salmon, naps precisely at 3 p.m., an inexplicable fascination with Tom's crackling weather radio. When Tom read aloud from the paper or from the Jack London novels Martha had loved, Cougar would stretch out and half-close his eyes, purring with a sound that reverberated through the room like a diesel engine. Dr. Patricia Brennan, the veterinarian who treated Cougar's vaccinations and occasional injuries, scolded Tom gently. "You're anthropomorphizing," she said. "He's not a little person. He doesn't understand your stories." "Maybe not the words," Tom conceded. "But he understands tone. He understands trust. That's enough. They navigated illnesses and injuries together. When Cougar was 3, a respiratory infection nearly took him. Tom spent nights on the clinic floor, syringe-feeding water and whispering promises of Glacier National Park trips in the spring. When an off-leash dog charged them on a walk, Cougar positioned himself between Tom and danger, hackles up, tail fluffed to twice its size. Tom felt both humbled and fiercely protective. Who, he wondered, was saving whom? Years rolled by, each marked in the journal Tom kept with carpenter's precision. Pages held feeding schedules and weight charts alongside personal reflections. August 15th. Cougar learned to play hide-and-seek today. I'm not sure who taught whom. December 2nd. Found him asleep in my bed again. One paw over my face. Didn't have the heart to move him. March 20th. Neighbor's dog got loose, charged. Cougar stepped in front of me, protective as an old sheepdog. Who's the wild animal here? By the time Cougar turned 15, silver streaked Tom's beard, and arthritis slowed the Bobcat's once lightning leaps. Walks shortened from miles to the length of the driveway. Tom built ramps to his favorite window perch and patted the floors. He mixed pain medication into venison chunks with the same care he'd once warmed milk. Dr. Brennan reminded him gently that quality of life mattered more than length. Tom knew, but knowing did not soften the edges of impending loss. On a spring evening in Cougar's 17th year, Margaret found Tom on the back porch. He had carried Cougar to a patch of sunlight beneath the old pine tree, a weathered book in his lap. The Bobcat rested his head on Tom's knee, eyes half closed as his chest rose and fell in slow, even rhythm. 17 years, Margaret whispered. No one believed you could do it. It wasn't about what they believed, Tom replied, fingers tracing the tufted ears he'd come to know better than his own. It was about keeping a promise. That night, Cougar died in his sleep, his great head resting against Tom's hand. Tom had rehearsed this moment in his mind for months, but grief defied rehearsal. He cradled the still warm body until dawn painted the mountaintops pink. The town mourned with him in ways he never expected. The credit union flew its flag at half-staff. The local paper ran a tribute featuring photographs taken by Tom's nephew, David, a wildlife photographer who had documented the unlikely family. Children left drawings of bobcats at Tom's gate. Sarah, who had once called him crazy, helped him bury Cougar beneath the pine where he had loved to sharpen his claws. The marker read simply, Cougar, wild at heart, loved by choice. 17 years of impossible made possible. In the months that followed, Tom walked the paths they had walked together, feeling an absence like a missing limb. Sometimes, in the golden hour when the sun slanted through the pines, he swore he heard that familiar rumbling purr. Then a letter arrived from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. James Rodriguez, now retired, wrote that Tom's meticulous notes had inspired changes in exotic animal protocols. His journals would be used to train future permit holders. Life, however, was not finished with Tom's wild heart. Nearly a year to the day after Cougar's passing, Tom returned to Mountain View Fur Farm. Earl had passed away and his son was liquidating. Most cages were empty, but in the last pen, a female bobcat paced with 2 kittens at her side. One, a male with a white blaze on his chest, watched Tom with wary amber eyes. "Nobody wants these," Earl's son said. "Too wild, too much trouble." Tom felt a familiar spark in his chest. 73 years old, joints aching, he should have laughed and driven away. Instead, he said, "I'll take them. All 3. It took longer to secure permits this time, regulations having tightened, but his reputation carried weight. Sarah Rodriguez, the young inspector who had approved his first enclosure and who now headed the agency, processed his application personally. "What you gave Cougar was a good life," she said, signing. "These bobcats couldn't ask for better." Tom named the mother Hope and the kittens Faith and Chance. He modified his property to accommodate them, building separate yet connected enclosures so they could maintain family bonds while having their own space. Hope remained wary, never fully trusting humans. Faith, bold and curious, reminded him of Cougar in his younger days. But it was Chance, with the white chest and amber eyes, who claimed the shredded recliner that had sat untouched since Cougar's passing. On quiet evenings, Tom would sit on the porch, Chance stretched at his feet, watching the sun set over the Swan Range. He would tell stories about a bobcat who once played hide-and-seek, who sat politely at the credit union, and who died with his head in a human's lap. Chance would look up with those enigmatic eyes and blink slowly, and Tom would laugh softly. "People said you can't raise a wild animal like family," he would say, scratching behind a tufted ear. They were right. You can't raise a wild animal into a house cat. You can't force a wild heart to be tame. But you can share your life with one. You can build trust and respect. You can meet in the middle and find something beautiful there. As he entered his 75th year, Tom established the Cougar Memorial Wildlife Trust, ensuring his property would become a sanctuary when he was gone. He mentored 2 young rehabilitators, teaching them not just how to build fences and mix formula, but how to sit quietly beside a creature that did not speak your language and still understand one another. The story of the man and the bobcat became legend in Montana, a testament to coexistence and the idea that family is chosen and sometimes has fur and claws. Even now, if you walk past Tom's property in the golden light of evening, you might hear the rhythmic scuff of paws on packed earth or the low rumble of a purr that seems too big for the body that makes it. And if you ask Tom about the impossible thing he did, he'll smile and shake his head. "We didn't tame each other," he'll tell you. "We just refused to let barbed wire and bureaucracy tell us we couldn't care." For 17 years, and counting, we proved that sometimes impossible is just another way of saying no one has loved hard enough yet.